Now, while baseball may be going through a tough time and there's a lot of uncertainty in the future of the sport, one thing that we did get to celebrate here in the city of Chicago is a new Hall of Famer, somebody who was so deserving of it, but had time and time again fallen a little short for many different reasons. And here on the Sports Cubicle, we are really lucky to have as our co-host somebody who's not just a White Sox fan, not just a baseball fan, but loves the history of baseball. And of course, that's Paul Chivari. So, Paulie, what happened this past weekend that got not only baseball excited, not only international baseball excited, but more importantly, a family here in Chicago excited?
Well, let's start by saying that we had two Hall of Famers from Chicago, technically, if you want to count Jim Cott with his brief tenure with the Chicago White Sox. But the most important one, Mr. White Sox, number 9, had his jersey retired, played 5 different decades with the White Sox. He basically is our only guy. Minnie Miñoso finally gets in, long overdue. It was it's something that I think they expected to happen back in 2006 when they wanted to induct more Negro League players. But Minnie didn't play that much in the Negro Leagues. So I think this was a good opportunity with the Veterans Committee to get him in. But, it would have been nice if they could have done this earlier. He passed away in 2015. So I think if they could have done this at least 7 years ago, he'd have a chance to celebrate it and, invite his friends and family to it. But this is still good that he made it in, and he means so much to this organization.
When you see Minnie and you kind of hear the legacy, and you've talked about the Negro League and his impact in Major League Baseball itself, a black Cuban man who became an American citizen, his family is ingrained in Chicago, the relationship they have with the Reinsdorfs. How surprising, how impactful, what does it mean to White Sox fandom, White Sox culture, that this family became part of the organization? What did it mean for the culture of the team on the South Side?
I think it legitimizes him, not that he needed it. He already was beloved by White Sox fans and the White Sox family. This was a guy that I'm sure he was on the payroll as an ambassador, but they could have not paid him and he still would have done the ambassador work. I mean, this is a guy, there's several anecdotes, but one in particular that stands out to me was from a friend of mine that went to an autograph session where Minnie was signing autographs, and Minnie, took the time to talk to him about his batting stance and work on it with him. This was a typical story of Minnie Miñoso, where he just loved the game so much, and he loved talking to kids about the game, and he loved just spreading knowledge about the game. And of course, he was there during the 2005 White Sox victory parade and was just overcome with emotion, just, so happy for the team and so happy to be a part of that. And, I think the team even gave him a ring as well as they gave some of their more distinguished members rings, championship rings, to kind of thank them for their service with the team. So, I mean, he means a lot. I mean, it was when he passed away in 2015. It was also around the same time that Ernie Banks passed away, and Ernie Banks was affectionately known as Mr. Cub. Well, even though I never heard Miñoso called Mr. White Sox, he embodied that, so he became Mr. White Sox, and both teams wore the respective players' jersey number for a game when they played each other during the season. I think there was a game at Wrigley where all the Cubs wore number 14 for Ernie Banks. There was a game at U.S. Cellular Field where all the White Sox players were number 9 for Minnie Miñoso. I mean, he meant that much to this team that they would have a game like that in his honor.
Now, obviously, I love baseball, huge Cub fan. I love to see what the White Sox have built in the South Side. And then this news comes out. What was a disappointing playoffs, at least the season ends before the lockout, that they get this message in there. They get a great in the Hall of Fame. A Sox hat is going to be embroidered in bronze and in Cooperstown, and that's amazing. But I want to stay on Cooperstown for a second. Ron Santo, the North Side, Minnie Miñoso, in the South Side. The relationship between Chicago fans, and the Hall of Fame, at this point, I feel it is a little fractured because there is hurt feelings. There is some sensitivity of we didn't get to see these legends, these good men, these great representation of our sport, of our favorite organizations, not get to be celebrated while they were alive. We say this here on the Sports Cubicle all the time. We want to give their people their flowers while they're still here. Neither one of these guys got that. The relationship between Cooperstown and Chicago fandom.
Yeah, and I think that says a lot about the process that, they both didn't get in through the Baseball Writers Association of America, and that could be a crime in itself, but they got in by the Veterans Committee, so they were selected by their peers to get in. But, were both of these enshrinements the result of a posthumous, correcting of a wrong while they were alive, or was it just long overdue? And part of it is the Veterans Committee only meets so often. I think if Miñoso missed this ballot, it'd be another 5 years before they'd even talk about it. And then the other thing, too, is you look at that list of people that were on the ballot. Dick Allen, another former White Sox player, he was one vote shy of making it in. And if you really examine those numbers, you wonder to yourself, why didn't this guy get in? And then the reverse of it is people look at Miñoso's numbers and say, well, this guy is watering down the hall. And that's not true at all, because when you isolate the 1950s in general, you're talking about one of the three best hitters from that decade. And I think that speaks to a lot that, this was a guy whose part of his career was limited to the Negro Leagues, so he didn't get to debut in the major leagues when he should have. And then, of course, with kind of service time and the way some of these players who broke the color barrier were treated, this is a guy that could have had a better career had he was he able to play it in Major League Baseball for his entire career. So, yeah, I think there needs to be an adjustment made, because you look at those list of players and you say, like, well, all of them could be Hall of Famers. If we're talking about them, then they could be Hall of Famers. But, the fact that it had to go this far kind of shows you that it's a fractured process.
It's a fractured process, which is even more upsetting because they're the ones making these arbitrary rules of who gets in, who gets out. It's these gatekeepers. And a lot of it comes down to this is a museum. This is a sport that is one of the only sports in the entire world, and especially here in America, where every record matters. Everything you do, every stat is kept. And if we're talking about the history of the game, we need to be able to enshrine these guys that maybe didn't have the Mike Trout numbers, the Babe Ruth impact, but were so important to the sport on so many different levels. And what we saw with Minnie and what we've seen a lot of guys based off of these ballots, which even 5 years, if that's the case, is way too far apart. I think baseball needs to do a better job of embracing its past, embracing its stars, and introducing it to a future fandom that they need desperately, especially coming off of what's going to be this lockout. And as we've said on the previous episode, nothing's changed yet because nothing's being affected. But we know baseball is on a clock now. And if they don't get this right, this is just another indictment on this entire organization. But Paulie, as we wrap up, thank you so much for being able to talk about this, because I know you're really passionate about not just the Cubs, the White Sox, baseball in Chicago, but the history of the game. I mean, any final thoughts on the Hall of Fame, the inductions, and of course Minnie Miñoso finally getting his rightful place in the Hall?
Well, I think most importantly, Buck O'Neil getting in was huge for the sport. This is a guy that was a living ambassador to the Negro Leagues. He kind of didn't have the best Negro League career, didn't have, really an exciting offensive standout career, but this was a guy that, managed in the Negro Leagues, coached in the major leagues. He was a scout with the Cubs. I think he was the first black scout with the Cubs, or I think with any organization, or at least maybe the first black coach. But more importantly, he helped found and open the Negro League Museum in Kansas City, and was a big help in getting some of those guys inducted in 2006 in that first wave of Negro League players that got induction into the Hall of Fame. So I thought it was very important that Buck O'Neil got in. I thought him and Minnie were the two living embodiments of guys that really helped grow the game and didn't matter to them. They were colorblind. They didn't care who they were associating with. They just loved the game so much that they wanted to spread the game and spread knowledge about the game. And I thought that they were the two most important people out of the list of, I think, like a dozen people that had a possibility to get in. And out of the 6 that made it in, I thought these were the two most important.
You said it so well, my friend, because baseball, it's one of the things that I love about it, being Puerto Rican, being Mexican, being Costa Rica, so much Latin in me is I love seeing how colorful the sport is, and that's what makes it beautiful. Even though there was so much segregation in the beginning of it, it's a sport unlike any other that's so international, and these Hall of Fame inductions really spotlight that. And even though we're going through these dark times, if you're a diehard baseball fan, not knowing what the future holds, there is a bright spot. Paul Chivari hosts a baseball podcast every week on the Baseball Weekend Journal. For all you who just listen to us on the Sports Cubicle, stay tuned for all the information throughout the offseason, throughout the winter, and any other breaking news. Our guy, Paul Chivari, covers the sport like a blanket. He's one of the best to do it. Let us know your thoughts, though, on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. How excited are you? How happy are you that Minnie Miñoso finally got to the Hall of Fame? And I'm throwing another question to you guys, putting the feet to the fire. Who's the next White Sox to make the Hall of Fame? We got more coming up next here on the Sports Cubicle on
Sosa.
WCPT 820 AM.